Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the CBC community. Thank you so much for joining me tonight for the first ever virtual presentation about the Learning Needs Program. I want to thank both Jim Brockman and Ryan Batliner for their assistance this evening. Ryan is in the background handling all the behind the scenes stuff tonight, and I really appreciate his support and Jim's support in helping get this up and running tonight. I hope that things run smoothly, and I hope you find this presentation informative. The LaSallian mission of providing a quality educational experience for all students, even those who may need educational support, is the foundation for our Learning Needs Program. I've been honored to serve in the role of learning specialist for the past 17 years, coordinating the services for students who may benefit from having access to accommodations. For those of you who I have not yet met, my name is Tracy Gilliland, and you'll see that right by my picture there. Gilliland is a mouthful, and I know that, and so I'm known as Mrs. G around the building, and you can certainly refer to me as Mrs. G, as can your students and your kids, excuse me. My background is in special education with an emphasis in learning disabilities, and my relationship with CBC started in 1991 when I began working at CBC as a private tutor. I transitioned to the position of learning specialist in 2004, and I've enjoyed my work with CBC students and parents tremendously all these years. And I look forward to getting to know all of you in these upcoming months. The Learning Needs Program at CBC High School offers resources to students with diagnosed disabilities so they have access to CBC's quality college preparatory high school experience. The Learning Needs Program is designed for students who are ready for the challenge of a traditional high school, but may require minimal accommodations to meet their academic goals. Tonight's meeting is designed to give you a general overview of the Learning Needs Program, including how students are eligible to participate. I will also touch on successfully transitioning to high school, which includes parents and students, and we'll conclude the meeting with specific information regarding the upcoming placement test and course registration events. If you have general questions while I go along during the presentation, please feel free to post those questions in the comments chat section. And at the end, we will have a Q&A time, and Ryan will be putting up questions for me to answer. But if you have a very specific question that really is related more to your son's unique needs, then I would appreciate receiving an email from you, and then I will contact you and we can kind of talk about that privately and individually. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this started with the information about the program. So we're going to start off by talking about what the Learning Needs Program is. And it's really for students that have diagnosed learning needs, which means there must be some kind of paperwork that relates to what that diagnosis is. It was created back in, I'm trying to think, 1998, I believe we started our program to support those students with disabilities, to hopefully support their needs enough that they can be academically successful. And students who qualify for accommodations do have an accommodation plan then put in place, and that's created by me with the information from their diagnosis. There's about 200 students currently, and have been about 200 students in our program for each year. So that's about 20 to 25% of any grade level that we are serving with the population that we have. And the disabilities that are included in this population are our main areas are learning disabilities and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but we also have students with language and speech disorders, autism spectrum disorder, and other physical or psychological disorders as well. There are benefits to participating in the Learning Needs Program, both for the student and for the parent. I, as a learning specialist, act as an additional support person and resource for parents. I don't take the place of a student's school counselor. Every student is assigned to a school counselor. I'm just an additional level of support. And that support is just a phone call or an email away, and students can just drop by my office. I have an office right next to the Learning Resource Center up near the counseling departments as well. I communicate frequently through the e-newsletter, through email, and sometimes through mailings, depending on what I need to communicate home. And additional support is available every day. I'm there every day before school, starting at 7:30, and I'm usually there every day until 4 o'clock. Students can certainly set up appointments in advance, but they can also just drop by my office. Another benefit is that for upcoming standardized tests during high school, students really need to have been receiving support during high school. That's kind of a requirement of ACT and College Board tests like the SAT. So having those accommodations available throughout high school kind of gives that kind of evidence, historical evidence, that a student is needing accommodations on those tests as well. My role is multifaceted. I primarily in the summer, especially, I'm writing and updating the students' accommodation plans, which are called the learning profiles. I provide information and support for parents and students and even teachers as well. I work with all those people if there are specific concerns related to a particular student, and I coordinate paperwork that's necessary for documentation of disabilities. So oftentimes if a student is undergoing an update to their documentation and they need some forms filled out by teachers, I am the coordinator of getting all that material collated and sent off to the agency that's doing that reevaluation. In terms of how I find out about concerns about students, I hear from parents primarily, so I really depend on parents to be accessible and also kind of paying attention to what's going on during the high school years so that I can do my job in supporting your sons. To be included in the Learning Needs program, I have to have certain forms and documents on file. And the main thing is to have current documentation of whatever that diagnosis is of disability. For our purposes, the evaluation is considered current as long as it's within 3 years. So if you kind of take that date and count forward 3 years, you'll figure out whether or not it's current. And I know right now it's been a little challenging with COVID to get documentation updated. So if you've been trying that and are struggling to get paperwork taken care of and updated, just let me know and we can talk about that together. It must be kept current and for continuous services at CBC, with the exception of juniors to be seniors. If a junior has already kind of gotten their ACT and College Board testing approval for accommodations, and they just need one more year of high school under their current accommodation plan, we allow an extension of that plan without the update of documentation. And we do that because we know that a college might want something very specific in terms of an update of documentation, and we'd rather you work with the college and get what they need versus doing a reevaluation for our purposes only. So that current documentation of disability is very important for us to have. And some of those I already have. Some of you have already provided me documentation, and I also have gone through all the applications that have been sent in, and some have had some documentation attached. So I will be communicating with you what kind of documentation I currently have and indication of need. And I will be doing that through private emails with each individual and trying to kind of help share with you what I still might need so that your son could receive services. There's two other documents that I'll need as well. Educational needs form and then the Learning Needs Program intent to participate form. Both of those forms are going to be posted, and actually are posted right now, on CBC's homepage website. There's the admissions section, and there's a Learning Needs Program tab within there. Thank you, Ryan. He just popped that up for me. So if you go to that website, that link there, it'll pop up those two forms. You can click on those and you should be able to fill those out and get those back to me. And those forms are kind of what I'll use to know for sure that you want your son to participate in the learning needs program. So once I have those two forms and I have the documentation of disability, I'm assuming that, yes, we're going forward and you want your son to have accommodations in high school. So what does that documentation of disability have to look like? And that's what this is all about. It can come in many forms. Some of our students have an actual public school evaluation, and the initial evaluation is great to have. I know some of those could be quite old. Kids sometimes have had their initial evaluation since they were in first grade, second grade. But having a copy of that is really helpful to have. And then any other reevaluation that they've had along the way may or may not have involved testing. A lot of times, once a student through public school has been evaluated, the reevaluation really comes every 3 years just through that update of a student's IEP or their service plan. And that counts. Those reevaluations do count on my end as a reevaluation. Even though it's just a paperwork reevaluation, it's still considered a reevaluation. So if you're a public school kiddo, or you have been in a private school but have public school documentation, those reports are really helpful. But some students don't have public school evaluations, and you don't need that. You can also have gone through a private entity or agency or individual. And as long as that person has the credentials to give an evaluation and to verify a diagnosis, then private evaluations are perfectly fine. The third kind of documentation that's acceptable for us is medical evaluations, a letter from a physician. And that happens a lot of times with students that have ADHD. Maybe they had a previous educational evaluation, but then they're just being followed by their physician, or maybe they never had an actual educational evaluation. Maybe it's just been medical. That's okay for our purposes. It'll allow for some basic accommodations, but that documentation from just a doctor does not allow for ACT and College Board, like SAT type of standardized testing. Those kinds of accommodations usually require a little bit more robust evaluations. So if you need some support in figuring out what to do for the kind of evaluations that we might need for the future, contact me and we can talk through that and determine what would be the best course of action for your son. So once I have all the documentation in place and I have those two forms from you that I need, then I can dive in and start creating your son's accommodation plan, which we call the learning profile. And that learning profile has three major components. The top portion is identifying information. Then I have an area where I kind of summarize some of the key factors that were mentioned in the evaluation report that might cause some challenges. And then the bulk of that accommodation plan is really the list of accommodations that are available to students. The information that I include in that profile comes specifically from the most recent evaluation that I have on file. So the next slide is going to show an example of the learning profile. And so really the information at the top, anything that's in italics and bold is just kind of an explanation. But where it says Christian Brothers College High School Student Learning Profile, that's the top of my form. And then you'll notice how it's got the student's name and their graduating class, date of birth. I list the dates of the evaluations, and also where it says profile, it's, you know, their first profile, and then it's updated every year. And if I get new documentation, then I do an update during the school year whenever I get that new evaluation information. Also, then there's the list of diagnoses that a student may have. And in that notes section is where I summarize key pieces of information that I think teachers need to know about your son's area of disability and how it impacts them educationally. Then underneath that, the classroom accommodations are all listed. There's a section for reading, writing, math, general accommodations, and then specifically test-taking accommodations. What I do to create this form is then I just mark the accommodations that are appropriate for your son. So the list stays the same of all those accommodations, but then I put a little X in each of the boxes that applies to each individual student's needs. At the beginning of a school year, then, teachers receive copies of their students' accommodation plans, so they're aware of which students of theirs have accommodations available to them. And I also send a copy of this home to you and to your son. Parents and sons get it the start of their freshman year, and then every year after that, I send it specifically just to the student. And I encourage students to save this someplace on their computer, because we want them to start owning what's on this plan and to be able to advocate for themselves for those accommodations that they feel that they need in each of their classes. Because as we know, all these accommodations that they have available to them, they may not need in every single class each year. They may only need a few of them or none of them. It just kind of depends. And so we're kind of turning the responsibility over to the student to start advocating for those accommodations when they feel like they need them. So it's important that students are prepared a little bit to do this. And that might be kind of different than what they're used to from their current school or the grade school. Rather than the learning specialist or their classroom teacher mandating that they use their accommodations, the students themselves, like I said, are going to be advocating to use the accommodations that they feel that they need as they go along through their high school years. Now, of course, that advocacy piece comes more naturally to some students than others, and I understand that, and I'm sure you understand that too. And I know parents always kind of freak out a little bit when I mention this piece about advocating, because that is kind of a challenging thing for a young man to do, and it's part of the process that we want them to take on, because we know that, you know, the 4 years we have them in high school goes by very quickly, and we want them to become more and more comfortable with advocating for themselves and making sure they're reaching out. But if you ever have any concerns that your son is not taking advantage of what they should, then certainly I want to hear from you so that I can work with them to make sure that they're getting the support that they need. Okay? So it's important that they do have a good understanding of their disability and how it impacts them. Also, make sure that they know what accommodations are available to them on their learning profile and go over that together at home. Advocating by a student really makes it clear to a teacher that they need those accommodations, and the teachers are very supportive. I mean, this is what we're all about at CBC. That's what a LaSallian education is all about, and so students never have to worry about asking for their accommodations from their teachers. And then, like I said, please notify me if there's any issues or problems. So for a student to transition to CBC, that knowledge of self is so incredibly important. Knowing their strengths and weaknesses, and then how to work with each. Using their school accommodations and encouraging that from your side of things is really helpful. And helping them learn how to set really good goals and strong goals for themselves to hold themselves accountable. It's a new world coming to high school. It's a big change for them. And so taking those steps of independence and maturity are really, really great. They also need to really be prepared for the rigors of high school. Knowing also their use of resources is so important too. You know, high school may be a big challenge for them, but they've got teachers and they've got their school counselor and they've got me in the background helping as well. We have the Learning Resource Center at CBC, which is a wonderful area, and it's available to every student in the school. It's open before and after school. It's supervised by teachers who are there to support and help any student that comes in to get some extra help. So encouraging our kids to take advantage of that resource is really important. We also have tutors at CBC. Families can contract with a private tutor that we have at CBC. We also have some families that have been with a particular outside tutor, professional tutor for years, and if we can make it happen, they can certainly come on our campus and work with the students. And then we also have National Honor Society students that do free tutoring for any student who requests. And then also knowing the technology. Every student's going to have a laptop. Every student will have the platform called Blackboard, which is where teachers post all students' assignments. Much of the work that they do in school is done on their laptop and submitted through Blackboard. Parents will have their own access to Blackboard. You'll have your own credentials, and you'll be able to check Blackboard to see how your sons are progressing. So knowing those things are really important. The rigors of high school do change. Homework demands can be greater, and along with homework demands come those other co-curricular kind of activities that students need to learn how to juggle. So if a student's going to participate in something that takes place outside of school, they have to know how to balance those extracurricular demands along with what the school demands are. And that's kind of a new thing for kids. If you're playing a sport, that's every day after school for that season. And a lot of kids that are participating in sports right now may only have to practice once or twice a week or have a game every once in a while, but high school sports are a whole different animal. So students need to learn how to balance all of that. And they also need to learn with that homework demand, how to study effectively. I think in grade school, a lot of times the students are provided with a lot of direct instruction on how to study or what to study. And in high school, that kind of retreats a little bit. And so students are expected to know how to prepare on their own for quizzes and tests, and how to look at past assignments and generate their own questions and study from that material. And so that's a big change for high school. And the need for organization. And this is always something that I know I hear a lot of parents groaning about. It's like, oh my gosh, my son's so disorganized. That's something that is important. And having a laptop is great because so much of the work that students do is in that laptop. But as we all know, if you don't name things correctly, documents correctly and things in your laptop, it's easily lost inside that laptop as well. So helping students know how to organize what they're doing on their laptop, but yet still organize papers and things that teachers hand out, they'll still have that as well. And there is that kind of micro organization, when is my next homework assignment due? Or, what should I name that document? Those are important pieces of organization, but then the macro is the bigger picture. What is the schedule? Do I know when my practices take place, or when we have that band concert, or when my doctor's appointment is that's going to interfere with my plans for doing whatever I need to do? When do I anticipate having a test over this material? Can I start preparing in advance? So all of those kinds of things step up a little bit more in high school, and they may need some support and help with that. And the students really should be involved in all parts of their education as well. So I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a minute and talk a little bit about how, as parents, and I'm a parent, my kiddos are grown, but how we are so involved with our kids, and especially these kids who need a little extra support. Sometimes we're even more involved than we would be with our other kiddos that don't need that kind of support. Now's the time to start figuring out that balance of how can I include my son more and make him more accountable for the parts of his education that he should be accountable for. So, for instance, if you're reaching out because you're concerned about something related to your child's educational progress, that's great. We want you to do that. But if there's a way to include your son in that conversation and have it be more of a teamwork approach rather than just parent and teacher or parent and counselor or parent and me. That's very valuable. Student really should be included in as much of those dialogues and conversations as possible, because that's how they're going to learn better about themselves and have a voice in what happens to them along the way. And oftentimes these students who do struggle in school don't really feel like they have a lot of control over what happens in their educational progress and process. And we want to empower them to feel like they want to take ownership of this. And so the more we can work with them and help them as a team, the better off they're going to be along the way. We are trying to develop those men for tomorrow, and that is our main goal for our 4 years that we have them with us. Now, on that by the same token, you all are transitioning along with your sons to CBC, maybe for the first time. Maybe you've had other sons come along CBC, but each student's journey at CBC is unique. And so this particular young man that you have coming along, we want to make sure that you know what we're kind of expecting on our end from you as well. So like I said before, communication and working in conjunction with us, key. Because there are 200 of the students that have these needs and accommodation plans, and there's only one of me, there's no way I can know on a daily basis how well any particular student is doing. I couldn't possibly keep up with grades, and grades change all the time. So I could look at a student's grades today and he might have a B in science, had taken a test today, and the teacher puts in the grade tomorrow, and now all of a sudden that grade's dropped to a C. Well, I'm not going to know that. And I'm not going to also know what your expectations are on your end. For some families, they'd be thrilled if their son had a C in math. Might be the first C they've ever had in math, and they're just over the moon with that. But for other families, a C in a class would be devastating. Their son may have never had a C before. So because everybody's expectations and goals are different, and I'm not going to know all of those along the way, it really does take that communication, so that if there's something not going right on your end, that you and student, we communicate together and try to put our heads together to figure out a plan to get things back on track. So being that active participant also includes setting high educational expectations. By high, I don't mean unrealistic. You know your sons by now. You know what they're capable of for the most part. This is a big change and adjustment, so we have to give a little leeway and latitude as they're making the transition at the beginning of the year. But you probably have a pretty good understanding of what they should be able to accomplish. So let's start off with really strong goals and expectations, and then hold your son accountable for his progress. You know, if you're not seeing him do much work at home, or you don't see it happening at all because he's shutting himself in his bedroom, but his grades are low, then something needs to change. We need to talk about that and figure out a plan to moving forward. And at the very beginning of the school year, especially for incoming freshmen, be prepared to sit down, and when I say work with your student on a daily basis, I don't mean actually doing the work with him, but work with him in terms of, show me Blackboard. Let me see what your assignments are. Show me how you can get into the calendar and know what your homework is. Show me what your teacher's posting. What are the resources that are available? That'll help you understand Blackboard better. And that will kind of ensure with you, you'll also see what he knows and what he isn't picking up on. The students do have an orientation program at the beginning of the year. Part of that will include some training on their laptops, but there's a lot to take in just a couple of hours worth of time. And some kids are really great, and a lot of kids are great at computers. I mean, they're all great at computers, but these different systems that they have to manage that they're unfamiliar with can take time for them to learn. So it's important that you're kind of with them, seeing what they know, seeing what they don't know, and then helping to guide them and tell them, hey, I think maybe you need to reach out and talk with somebody because it looks like maybe you're a little confused here. That could be through email. So help them craft an appropriate email to a teacher, or help them set up an appointment with me so we can kind of take care of those things. But that's what I mean by working with your son on a daily basis. And then as you see him transition and see him managing on a daily basis, you can start to kind of creep back a little bit and not be in his space so much, and kind of do the gradual release over time. Still keeping your eye on things in the background, though, checking Blackboard, making sure the grades are where you expect them to be, but yet you have confidence that he's got it and he's understanding what he needs to do. And the last point here is just include your son in educational decisions. And that kind of means, when you're having meetings about updating paperwork and documentation, especially if you have a son that's still going to participate in public school types of services, the SNAP services that are available to all of our kids, it's helpful for them to participate in those meetings with their teachers and participate in meetings with us at CBC as well. That's really important. All right. So the next thing that we want to talk about is, what else you need to do to be familiar with resources available at CBC. We have a lot of things out there for parents with the website. And like I said, you'll have your own credentials to Blackboard. The counseling department does a fabulous newsletter that comes out weekly. And also the administrative team has a newsletter that comes out every week. So there's so much information that comes to you from CBC. So please take time to read all of those things because they're just invaluable resources for you. Know about the academic assistance for students, and also keep in touch with our IT department if you ever have any questions or concerns about how the technology is working. And then attend any meeting that you can. Any kind of large group meeting that we have tonight. Thank you for being here if you're here. This is important. And setting up individual meetings with counselors and or myself, it can be really critical and valuable as well. So don't ever feel like you're bothering us, is what I want to say. Yes, I have 200 students. Yes, the counselors have lots of kids too, but we really, really, really want you to reach out and let us know when you have concerns, because the sooner we start addressing concerns when they're kind of small, the easier it is to get things turned around. And if we wait too long and just assume that it's going to take care of itself and it doesn't, then it can become a bigger and bigger problem and much harder to solve as time goes on. And now kind of some nuts and bolts. So that was kind of big picture stuff I just presented. And here, these are some very specific things that come up related to course selection for next year specifically, and just some other details. So the first one I have on my page here is about world languages. Whether to take or not to take, and when to take, if you will, if your son will. We offer 3 world languages right now. We have Spanish and French and Chinese, and we do not require a world language for students to graduate from CBC. So there may be a lot of sighs of relief out there. However, with that being said, there are colleges that do require a world language to be on a transcript, and it's usually 2 years of the same language is the most standard requirement for most colleges. So we tend to encourage most students to give it a try at some point. A lot of students, if they have a world language exposure coming out of middle school, it's a good idea for them to go ahead, if it's been successful enough, to go ahead and try to do their 2 years freshman and sophomore year, if it fits into their schedule. But for other kids, either they did not have a successful go at it, or they've never tried it before, they wouldn't have to start next year. Starting a freshman year is kind of tricky, and to add something brand new into the mix on top of just everything else being so brand new may not be the best idea. So oftentimes we make the recommendation of holding off with the world language and either starting that sophomore year and doing sophomore junior year, or even starting junior year and ending senior year. And then if their college requires them taking a language, then they can step right into their freshman year in college and take whatever the requirement is. And they've got that, exposure right up against their college experience in the language class too. So world language is kind of tricky. Kind of depends on you, how you feel, how your son feels about taking it. But just know that we are very flexible on our end because we don't have it as a school requirement for graduation. Study hall. We do offer, it's a monitored, managed study hall for students, and it's primarily for students in the Learning Needs program. It's designed for a couple purposes. One, it allows students to have that time during a school day to get some schoolwork done, to study, to ask questions of the teachers who are there for support. So that's one benefit of study hall. Another benefit is it lessens their load, so they'll have one less class with that study hall in place of that class. And if a student is going to take advantage of any professional tutoring while they're at CBC, they almost have to have study hall on their schedule in order to find the time for the tutor to meet with the student, okay? But that study hall does not earn credit. So we have to watch how many semesters of study hall a student might take within their 4 years of high school. All students will be taking usually 7 classes each year. And so over the course of 4 years of high school, students could accumulate 28 credits upon graduation. We only require students to have 26 credits when they graduate. So there's 2 years or 4 semesters worth of flexibility in every student's schedule. So what that allows for is for our students in the Learning Needs program to potentially take up to 4 semesters of study hall in the course of their 4 years of high school and not have to worry about not having enough credits for graduation, okay? There will be some students who might need or want more than 4 semesters of study hall during high school. And if they do, then we do have to start thinking about how are they going to earn those credits to make up for those study hall times, those semesters. We have different ways of doing that, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later, but I just want to make sure that you know that study hall is an option for our students, but not every student that's in the Learning Needs program takes a study hall. It's not mandatory, it's not required, it's just an option for our students. And during that course registration evening, study hall appears in the electives column as Learning Needs first semester, Learning Needs second semester. So if you're interested in signing up for study hall, you can choose first semester, second semester, or for some students, they might even choose to take study hall both semesters, especially again, if they're going to have professional tutoring at CBC. If you're thinking about possibly wanting study hall, and you're thinking it would be beneficial because high school is going to be so new for your son, first semester then is kind of the obvious choice of which semester to try. And then if it looks like, boy, oh boy, he really needs study hall, it's really effective. If he didn't sign up for study hall second semester, a lot of times we can take out whatever elective he chose and put a second semester study hall in place. Sometimes that's an option, okay? Sometimes though, depending on the classes that students choose to take or have to take, study hall may not fit. And so in those cases, for those students who want professional tutoring, then we may have to look at, can that professional tutoring take place before school or after school? And those are possibilities. It just depends on the tutors and when they're available. So I mentioned professional tutoring. Like I said, we have one main tutor who works with CBC very regularly. And then we have other students who are working with a different agency, but those tutors come to our building as well. So we have a really good relationship with them. It's DARR Tutoring, DARR Tutoring. They're wonderful. And we've had many, many of those tutors come to our building as well. So those are kind of our two. Jeannie Murphy is our primary tutor who's working with CBC, and then DARR Tutoring, we've had several individuals come from them. But like I said before, if you have a tutor that your son's been working with and you want to continue that relationship and the tutor is available to come on our campus and work with your son, we can make that happen. I just need to know about that tutor, and we just need to take care of some paperwork, and then they can come to campus as well. The next point here is about CBC sport participation. This kind of goes along with how can kids earn extra credits outside of class time. Some of our sports, our CBC sports, count for their mandatory PE credits. All students need to have 2 semesters of physical education to graduate. That's a state law that we follow. But if they participate in our CBC sanctioned sports, they can earn their PE credit that way, as long as they've participated to the acceptable level, number of practices and games that they participate in, and then they can earn credit. How that can help with study hall is then students wouldn't need to take PE during the school day if they are going to earn their PE credit through sport. So that would free up potentially 2 more semesters for students to have a total of 6 semesters of time for study hall versus just the 4 that we were talking about before. And then another way that students can earn extra credit, whether it's to balance out study hall or if they just want to do it on their own, is summer school. We offer a limited number of classes. Actually, we're only offering 3 for incoming freshmen. We have a PE class, a weight training class, and an art class. That information is posted on CBC's website on our homepage. To the right-hand side is a summer school link, and if you click on there, it kind of gives you the description of those classes and the dates of those classes. This year it's June 7th through July 2nd, so it takes place during a month. And when I think each class is like an hour and a half or 2 hours long at best. So if a student successfully completes one of those summer school classes or multiple summer school classes, then they can earn credit. And again, that can balance out study hall. But summer school isn't the only way through CBC isn't the only summer school option. Some local public schools offer summer school for their students, but they can also allow non-public students to participate. So you could contact your local public school and see if they're offering summer school and go that route. Or there are online programs that do classes as well. The only thing that you need to make sure that you do if you're considering summer school that isn't CBC summer school is make sure you've checked with us before you register your son to make sure that we will accept the credit for those, whether it's your public school or whether it's an online class. You need to work with us so that we can approve whatever it is that you're deciding to do, because I'm sure your son would not be thrilled to have taken a summer school class and then find out on the back end that, oh, sorry, we're not going to accept credit for that. That would not be good. So make sure you check with us first before you sign up if you're wanting him to get credit at CBC. Okay. The next thing on my list is the standardized testing date, which is Saturday, March 6th. I believe you may have already received information about that testing day. And the main thing I want to mention is that we really don't offer any standardized accommodations for this testing. This test is an untimed test. So for the majority of kids who have accommodations, extended time is probably the most common accommodation that kids have. So just know that on this particular test, they are not timed. They are allowed to have as much time as they need to finish the testing. We can't have readers and things on this particular test because it throws off the data that they collect. So we're not allowed to do that. And we use the standardized testing data just in part to help us with placement decisions for classes for next year, but it's not the only thing that we're looking at. We are looking at their grades, we're looking at the other standardized test scores that they've taken in the past. And if you get these scores back and you think they really are way off the mark, that you're surprised. Well, sometimes parents are surprised how well they did, which is a whole unique situation in and of itself. But usually with standardized testing, we know that these particular students don't always shine on standardized tests, and we kind of understand that. But if you think that those scores are really not indicative of their capabilities, we certainly want to know that. And I would love to hear from you about that once you get those scores back, because we don't want to make placement decisions and have kids placed in the wrong level of classes when they shouldn't be. So we can work together to craft those decisions around placement so that it's appropriate for your sons. And then lastly on this slide is pre-registration evening, Tuesday, March 9th. Again, I think you've already gotten some information about that pre-registration evening. I know they're still working out, administration's still working out details about how to do this in a safe manner. So I don't know that they have all of that worked out, but I do believe we're still planning on doing that in person, just like the standardized testing. And during that evening, there will be people available to help walk you through pre-registration. And I have a table there as well, down in the dining hall. That's kind of where you'll be located as well to do pre-registration. And so certainly come and see me and say hi if that's the only reason why you wanted to stop by. But if you have paperwork you want to drop off, either during the standardized testing date or pre-registration, that will be a great time. If you filled out those forms and you want to bring them in, that's perfect. Either one of those 2 days. If you want to check about pre-registration, talk through some issues that you might have, questions you might have about study hall and things like that, please stop by my table so that we can chat and I can get to see you and get to know you a little bit. Okay, well, I think that takes care of my presentation. So we're ready for questions and answers. Maybe some of you have posted some questions, and I know Ryan was going to share those with me so I can answer any questions that you might have had. Okay, do parents have a Blackboard login, or do we go in through our sons? At the beginning, good question, Sarah. At the beginning of the year, you probably want to go through your son. Have your son go in and just sit with him. It takes a couple of weeks before the IT department can get those parent credentials established and sent out to parents. So your main way in is through your son's login initially until you get your own credentials. Thanks for your question. Do they have the ability to download programs like the reading programs, Learning Ally, dictation software? Great question. Students are not allowed to load those kind of programs onto their computers, but with permission through IT, through my permission, verifying that a student has those needs, and you providing them the necessary software to IT department, yes, it can be loaded, but it has to go through the IT department to get those programs loaded onto the kiddos' computers. Thanks again, Sarah. Jeff, what hands-on support does the Learning Center provide? In the Learning Resource Center, we have a primary support person that's there all day long. Her job, her role is to be there not only as the person to answer questions before and after school, but she's also the study hall teacher. And so that's the kind of support we have during the whole school day. We also have 2 teachers on either end of the day, one in the morning and one at the back end of the day that are in there. And then I am in there a lot before and after school. We do have students that are getting their tutoring through National Honor Society student tutors who work in there together, as well as the professional tutors who are meeting with students as well. Thanks, Jeff. When is the Learning Resource Center open? It opens every day at 7:30, and school starts at 8:40. So we're open just a little over an hour in the morning, and then it stays open until 4 o'clock each day, and the school day ends around 3 o'clock. So again, we're open for an hour after school. That's for kids, like I said, to drop in, but that's also the time if students needed extra time on a test. Usually they'll stay after school and finish up tests after school, because we don't hold them over from one class into the next class period to finish tests. We know they need to move on and transition to their next class. So we keep the tests, or the teacher holds on to the test and then provides it to the Learning Resource Center so the kids can come and finish up at the end of the day. Oh, daily schedule for a student. Many of you might know we're on a block schedule, but I know I get that question a lot, and students and parents aren't aware. We have 2 alternating days. We have Gold Day and we have Purple Day. A student will have 4 classes on their Purple Day, and then their blocks, and then the Gold Day, there's 3 classes with a block between the first and second class of the day. It's called advisory activity period. So there are 4 blocks on each day, but on the Gold Day, kids only have 3 academic classes and then advisory activity period. All right, everybody. Well, I hope I answered a lot of your questions about our Learning Needs program, but please reach out with any individual questions that you might have. My email address is scrolling at the bottom. Again, getting documentation to me, various ways to do that, whether you want to mail it in, whether you want to send it to me via email, whether you want to make a copy and bring it in during the placement testing night or day, excuse me, or the course registration evening. Also, those 2 forms that I had mentioned, the educational needs form and the indication of participation form, can be found on that link. There it is. Thank you, Ryan. So please go to that and print those forms out, or even they should be fillable PDFs. I think I kind of fixed those so that if you wanted to download them, fill them out and send them to me via email, that'd be great as well. I really look forward to getting to meet all of you individually, and thank you again for your time this evening. I do appreciate it. Have a great night. Thank you.